It's Thursday, September 7th, 2017, and this is Seaside Chats with Kenneth Arthur, and that's me, Kenneth Arthur, where every week I sit down and I talk about the NFL with a comedian, improviser, entertainer, actor, something along those lines, perhaps, about their favorite NFL teams, usually the team that the Seattle Seahawks are playing that particular week. Sometimes maybe it won't work out that way, but it did this week as the Seahawks open up their 2017 season. As we record this at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Thursday, we're just a few hours short of the 2017 NFL season kicking off for real games, regular season between the Kansas City Chiefs and the New England Patriots. But this coming Sunday, the Seattle Seahawks and the Green Bay Packers renewed their rivalry. Yes, a rivalry, a real rivalry between the Seahawks and Packers, two of the most dominant teams in the NFC. Over the last decade or so, for the Seahawks, I mean, the Packers can go way back to Super Bowl I, so they have that going for them. But both teams have things going for them this week as they face off in Lambeau Field. In recent years, these two teams have played some of the most classic NFL games of all time. If you look at the Hail Mary game with Golden Tate, if you look at the NFC Championship where the Seahawks could come back with a overtime win with Jermaine Kearse and Russell Wilson. So lots to talk about. Of course, I didn't mention the fact that the Packers have beaten the Seahawks in Lambeau twice in that period of time, including the most dominating victory over a Pete Carroll Seahawks team since 2011 with their 20-point win against the Seahawks last season at home. The Seahawks hope to come in this year more ready and more prepared and less injured with guys like Earl Thomas being, and coming back, ready to play. Tyler Lockett, hopefully, we'll see. So it should be a good game. And with me this week to talk about the Green Bay Packers is Josh Simpson, comedian, writer, teacher, improviser, host of the Meet podcast, where himself and Jake Jabbour bring in improvisers every week to just improv, have some fun, talk about some real stories, and then pick the meat off the bone and get into some improv. Josh Simpson, thank you so much for joining this week and getting ready to talk about Green Bay, Wisconsin, and the Packers.
Oh, my pleasure, man. I'm excited about the season starting up. So
my reaction so far, I think, from my guests in this short amount of time that I've done this, beginning with Josh Kovit and the Chargers in the preseason week 1, is comedians are excited to be able to talk about the NFL because it's harder maybe to find not just sports fans, but specifically NFL fans in the comedy community. Do you find that to be true?
I guess sort of, but I mean, like, I got my crew,
For sure. Everybody, you're going to gravitate maybe towards the people that can talk about the Packers, but I find myself in a lot of rooms where nobody cares about football.
Yeah, that's definitely a kind of true, I think. But, I definitely know who I can talk to about it. Let's say that. Like, it might not be everybody, but, like, if I see Meharry, I'll ask him about the Chiefs, or if I see James Mastriani, I ask him about the Steelers.
Exactly.
But yeah, my roommate and I are big into football, so I get a lot of it there.
And which team is your roommate into?
Patriots.
There it is.
Yeah.
Lots of Patriots fans, I feel like, but that's true of the fact that they're the Patriots, I think. And
New England in general. They sort of cover a lot of states in New England, I think.
True. And I think the Seahawks I've met a lot of Seahawks fans, but I don't know if that's me in LA, but I talk to people who aren't fans of the Seahawks, and they're like, I think that there are more Seahawks fans here than there are other fans. I mean, definitely more so than I would say the Rams, because I don't know very many Rams fans.
Come down to the east side, friend.
Oh.
Come meet some Rams fans.
Maybe I'll stay away from the east side.
Rams flag outside, but I do think you're right that, like, there's not a lot of, like, I don't know. I didn't know a lot of Rams fans, before, or I guess this year when they came back.
Yeah, it's different now, and we'll see what happens with the Chargers moving to the LA area. But speaking of areas and fandom, you grew up. Talk about some of where you grew up, and how you came to be a Packers fan in terms of maybe your first experiences that you have memories with the Green Bay Packers, what era that was, maybe your first favorite team or first favorite player with the Packers. What's your background there?
I make a guess, but I'll go into it. So yeah, I grew up in Menominee Falls, Wisconsin. That's right outside Milwaukee. And I would say as a kid, I was more into baseball. I liked the Brewers and stuff like that. But my parents would always watch the Packer games, and there wasn't much to watch, honestly, like in my first 10 years, just because the Packers were bad. It was like Don Mikowski and I don't even remember the other players, but like Sterling Sharp was okay. But there wasn't like a lot to talk about with the Packers. They didn't make the playoffs very often. And then when I was around like third grade, Favre came up. Mikowski got injured. He got hurt in a game. I don't know if I watched it. I don't remember watching that game. But like then when Favre started becoming a thing was about when I started caring about football in general. So I would say like a lot of my fandom started with Brett Favre. And I remember watching like playoff games against the 49ers and the Eagles. Actually, my first memory of watching the Favre is watching them play the Chiefs, and they lost on Monday Night Football. Mm-hmm. And I was still at the age where that like really affected me. Like I was like, the bad guys won, you know?
Yeah.
And I remember one of the Chiefs did a mocking thing where they like pretended they were peeing on like a fire hydrant, like at Lambeau Field. And I was so offended by that as a kid. But anyway, I guess the short answer to your question is the Favre era. That's what got me. And yeah.
Well, so as someone who grew up, it's interesting because as a Seahawks fan, and I try and, put myself in other people's shoes, at least in the terms of like, I wonder what that was like, because I don't have that same experience. And for me, like growing up a Seahawks fan, there wasn't anybody like Brett Favre that you could latch on to. And then when, say, someone like Walter Jones or Matt Hasselbeck or Sean Alexander came around, you still couldn't compare. I mean, you could compare Walter Jones to him on a talent level, but not on the type of level when you have a star quarterback, a 3-time MVP. There's not anything quite like that. And then as Favre's career went on, the relationship seemed to sour between him, or at least that's the way the media presented it, between him and the city and the team fans and everything like that. But from your perspective, did you see Favre could do no wrong? Did you see the flaws in Favre's game? Even today, looking back, are you like, well, there's things to like and there's things to not like? So how did you feel about Favre growing up, and how do you feel about him today?
I loved watching him. I think like that's something that people kind of forget. It's just how fun he was to watch. Like he was sort of a runner and gunner. He took chances. Like he famously like in the first quarter he would like be so excited that he would be like overthrowing balls. Like he had to calm himself down actually. But his style of play was that he would take chances. And when he was young and in like able, like it was super fun to watch because he would just pull off impossible stuff. And then I feel like as he got older, like those chances became like he didn't really adjust to like his body. Like I feel like he still took those chances, and that's why I believe his last 3 years ended in an interception. His last play with the Packers, he threw an unnecessary interception against the Giants that ended the NFC Championship game, where like all he needed to do is just not throw the ball. It was a tie game and we could have maybe gotten a field goal, but he did not need to take that chance. But that's also why I like him. Like he is my favorite athlete. And it's because I think he played the game just like in his own style, and it led to some like really fun moments. I mean, like even for the Vikings when he had some like Hail Mary, like last minute game winners and stuff like that. And it's like, I always like after Favre left the Packers, I had no ill will. I know there were some people in the city that like, there were people like burning his jersey and stuff. It's like, he's a football player. Like, if he wants to play football, he can still play it. And then he made it to another NFC Championship game. So he was still good. But I never also blamed the Packers for letting him go. We had Aaron Rodgers, For sure. It makes total sense. And in that same sort of vein, another thing that I can't relate to that I'm curious about, I mean, as I mentioned at the top of the show, the Green Bay Packers won Super Bowl I and they won Super Bowl II. And I mean, the freaking trophy is named after Lombardi. Lambeau Field is, I mean, now you can sort of, it's clearly still a thing that's iconic because people go to it now. But in terms of those Packers of the 60s, and how dominant they've been historically
because of those Lombardi teams and Bart Starr and everything, do you hold any sort of like pride about it? Or do you like think about it and be like, yeah, we did that. Like we won the first 2 Super Bowls. Or do you think that was so far or before I was born, before I knew what football was, and before I was an idea in anyone's head that it doesn't really matter?
I definitely think it's cool, like for cool history for the club. I mean, like Bart Starr is still like a hero among Packer fans and everything, and the Ice Bowl was pretty awesome to watch, like on ESPN Classic and stuff like that. But honestly, I'm like, I spend less time with that and more time with like, who are the Packers looking to draft? Are they making any trade? Like it, like,
right.
I'm just more in the present, especially because again, we have Aaron Rodgers, who's like,
yeah.
We have an exciting team still, you know, but I take some pride in it, but not a ton.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we can relate to Mike Holmgren, obviously, led the Packers to 2 Super Bowls, won 1, left for the Seahawks, led them to a Super Bowl, didn't win it. Is an interesting case for like the Hall of Fame and that kind of thing, but he doesn't, I don't know if he quite moves the needle straight over to being in the Hall of Fame, though 3 Super Bowls for 2 different teams is pretty impressive. What were your thoughts on Mike Holmgren, and do you think that he was a better coach than Mike McCarthy, or are you happier now? Do you think Mike McCarthy is a better coach now that he's even been in Green Bay almost, significantly longer than Holmgren ever was?
Yeah, I'm not sure. To be honest with you, like I was so young when Holmgren was the coach that I don't think I had really any good opinions about what he was, like I do know like that I think the reason he left is because he wanted to be the GM too, right? He wanted to have more like control.
Yeah, he's going to get some more power and yeah, you're right. Kids' opinions suck for the most part.
Like I didn't know anything about, I don't know, coaching or football. I still know not a ton. Like, sometimes I'll put it in there like, all right, I'll recognize if it's a cover 2 or a cover 4. And I'm like, yeah, this is a little, this is a little much.
Yeah.
I get it in general, but like, the comparison to McCarthy,
what do you think? I mean, what do you think of Mike McCarthy now? Because he's a guy that I've pretty much been ragging on for the last 3 or 4 years, just as honestly, in the most unbiased way possible. Just if I'm Ted Thompson, or if I'm running that team and I'm looking at Mike McCarthy and I'm saying, well, now we're going into our 7th season since Aaron Rodgers won a Super Bowl, and Aaron Rodgers is one of the greatest players of all time, and he's still got some time left, but the Packers haven't gotten it done in the playoffs. They haven't reached the Super Bowl since then. McCarthy has had some questionable play calling at that time, but he does consistently get the Packers to the playoffs, and he does have a ring. So, where do you stand right now with McCarthy?
I think he has his strengths and his weaknesses, but I would say like my big knock on him, like, and he's gotten a little better at it, but my big knock on him is that he doesn't like finish games. Like, and the best example of that is the most heartbreaking loss I've ever watched as a fan, which was against you goddamn Seahawks. Like my whole thing watching that was just like step on their neck, like he didn't finish it off. He was very conservative. He kept going for field goals, and like the interception that we got on Russell Wilson, and then it's not McCarthy calling this, but like Morgan Burnett intercepted Russell Wilson, took a knee. It's like, finish him. We got to go to the Super Bowl. We can't let the Seahawks hang in there. We're at their house. But like I feel like Mike McCarthy gets up and he's good at like play calling for Aaron Rodgers to get like points on the board, and then when he gets up, he'll run the ball. And before we had Eddie Lacy, which again now something else we share. We didn't have a running back that could like take time off the clock or anything. So we would ultimately just run the ball 3 times, punt it, and then people would get back in the game. It was just like, God, will you finish this game off? I also think he after that Seahawks game when he like took play calling away from himself, I thought that was a pretty weak move. It's just like someone else will do the play calling, and then that got all messed up, and then so he took it back. It's just like all that uncertainty I don't really like. But honestly,
go ahead.
I think that Ted Thompson is maybe a bigger problem than our coaching, and Packer fans are always like, in Ted we trust and all that kind of stuff. But like our weaknesses have been the same for a while, like middle linebacker, secondary, and now offensive line, which I think is going to be a real problem for us this year. But
interesting. I mean, yeah, Ted Thompson, another guy. I mean, when I look at if I look at the team's drafting record since they, another connection, they lost John Schneider from their front office to the Seahawks. They lost the GM of the Chiefs and the GM of the Oakland Raiders. All of those guys left within a period of a couple years out of the Green Bay system, became GMs elsewhere, have had success elsewhere. And since then, the Green Bay Packers have not had a great record with drafting. So I think that's something to take note of. But in terms of, Ted Thompson's best move and, maybe his, I think his first move, that drafting of Aaron Rodgers when they had Brett Favre and everything like that, that sets him up for, a long time with a lot of leeway when you can grab Aaron Rodgers in that particular situation. For someone who grew up and Brett Favre is your favorite player, favorite athlete, I mean, how does that compare to Aaron Rodgers for you now? Because it seems like Aaron Rodgers is the better overall quarterback compared to Brett Favre. I mean, his numbers are uncomparable to any other player in history, including Steve Young. I mean, it's really remarkable to see. But then again, when we're living in this era of passing, I think it would be abnormal to not have record numbers and eye-popping stats. So it seems like Aaron Rodgers is dominating more so than Brett Favre, but is playing in an easier NFL. How do you feel about Aaron Rodgers and specifically compared to Favre, your favorite player?
I think Rodgers is smarter. I don't know if it's easier for Rodgers. I know that it is pass heavy, but I mean, like, Favre threw it. I don't know the exact stat, but like, isn't Eli the only one like that's even close to him with how many interceptions they've thrown? Like, Favre threw a lot of interceptions.
Yeah, it's insane. Like, I mean, Favre threw 29 interceptions a couple years before he left Green Bay, but then oddly, like you said, he still had a few more Pro Bowls left after that, but he would just throw 29 interceptions sometimes.
Yeah, like I said, he took chances. And then I'll tell you, the first year that we had Rodgers, the transition from watching Brett Favre as your quarterback to Rodgers, I was so frustrated with Rodgers because he would literally just take sacks. Like, if no one was open, he would just crumble and take the sack. So, like, and I just wasn't used to watching that. Yeah. It was just like, it was weird, honestly, like as a fan to like, I didn't know you played football that way. I don't know. But Rodgers eventually sort of like did come around to like, he got more comfortable. But I think that is the biggest difference between Rodgers and Favre is just that like Rodgers won't throw a bad ball as often as Favre would. Like he'll be smarter about it.
Well, let's talk about what's going on with the Packers right now. Then, obviously, the Packers are, going into another season like everybody else, and again are in contention for the Super Bowl mostly because of Aaron Rodgers. But the last time they played, they were going up against the Atlanta Falcons in the NFC Championship game. They went down 31-0. They lost 44-21. It's going to leave a bad taste in your mouth, just like it left a bad taste in Seahawks fans' mouth to also get blown out by the Falcons in last year's playoffs. Yeah. So the changes that, some of the changes that Green Bay is facing, like you mentioned, the offensive line has lost TJ Lang to the Detroit Lions. Jari Evans comes in. Brian Bulaga right now is just dealing with an ankle thing, but that's not a personnel change. Martellus Bennett comes in. Eddie Lacy goes to the Seahawks. And overall, well, and how do you feel about some of those changes on offense then, with Martellus Bennett in, Eddie Lacy out, TJ Lang out?
I don't know. I think it's going to be interesting to watch. I think our offensive line is going to be problematic. Like, even one of our backups, I don't know if it was Barclay. I forget exactly which one it was. I think it is Barclay. Like, is hurt. Like, we're one tackle away from being really bad on the offensive line. Like, if Bulaga can't pull through, that is going to be rough sledding. And I think our backup center got hurt. Like, we are so thin. And that's the thing that we lost was like, we lost our backup center and guard, J.C. Treader. We lost, I forget his name, another one of our tackles. We lost like 3 of our like guys at offensive line. And Favre. Rodgers got hit in the preseason.
Uh-huh.
We're getting burned, and our rookie doesn't look good either. I think Bennett will help with that. I think that's part of the reason we got him is like to get someone that is a tight end that's good at blocking. But yeah, things I'm most nervous about are definitely offensive line. I'm not sure Montgomery's our guy as far as a running back is concerned. Like last year, he didn't have the stamina for it. So I'm a little nervous about the running game. Eddie Lacy is fat though. Did you know that?
Hold on, let me check. Let me look into it. Click, 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 click. Oh yes, he is.
He's slow. So I wish he would have been in better shape and had a little bit. Like honestly, it was noticeable. Like that, There was kind of like a tired joke by the end, but like he would break free. Like he was pretty good at breaking 1 or 2 tackles, and then he would just get chased down.
Yeah.
He wasn't getting more than like a 20-yard gain at some points.
Yeah, that maybe because there's comps to be made to Marshawn Lynch, but it sort of seems to end because after the broken tackles part, Marshawn Lynch also broke away speed. He's the complete player, and Eddie Lacy obviously has slowed down a bit. But I mean, how did it feel those first 2 seasons? I mean, he came out of Alabama certainly as a great prospect and looking good. Those first 2 seasons, I mean, how do you compare those to, because Green Bay is not known for having like running backs for more than like a year. I know that Green Bay, it seems like to me, if the ones that I can think of, the running backs, like, I think James Starks and everyone like that, it seems like they come out of nowhere and then they are gone just like that sometimes.
Yeah, Starks was around for a while, but he was just a perennial backup. I wish I had a better answer. It feels like.
But how did he look? I mean, Eddie Lacy looked. You were pretty excited in like his rookie season and everything like that. Yeah.
He kept us in the season where Rodgers got hurt. He pretty much single-handedly kept us in contention, and we made the playoffs that year. I mean, he was fun to watch too because he was like a bowling ball. It's fun to watch a running back that hit the other players instead of like got hit. Like I just like that style, like the Marshawn style, I guess you could say. I mean, I actually liked him up until last year too. Like he was still averaging pretty good yards, like after contact and stuff like that.
The Packers drafted 3 running backs: Jamal Williams in the 4th round, Aaron Jones in the 5th round, Malachi Dupre. Oh no, that's a wide receiver. Devontae Mays in the 7th round, and it looks like all 3 have made the team. Does Jamal Williams or any of these guys? Because over in Seattle, we got the 7th round pick named Chris Carson that's making waves. How do you feel about these rookies?
None of them really popped too much in the preseason. Aaron Jones, that's the second. That's the 5th rounder, right?
Yes.
Yeah, Jamal Williams. He had a couple good like catches. He looks pretty good out of the backfield. But I was actually excited about that, like drafting 3 running backs, just because I think it'll be good for all of those running backs to like against each other and be hungry. But if I were to predict, I would say they're going to get some touches in this offense. And I think that maybe what McCarthy's going for here, is like Ty's probably going to be our lead back, but I bet you, just like he did in the past, he'll give those other guys a series or 2. And he'll probably depend on like these fresh legs, coming into games. He used to do that with Lacy and Starks. He would just give Starks a whole series.
Right. The one thing that reminded me, I was going to ask this question earlier, but the Packers drafted Vince Beagle, linebacker out of Wisconsin. And I liked Beagle going into the draft, but Wisconsin reminded me, hey, that's where Russell Wilson played. Did you have any, do you follow the Badgers at all? And did you have any feelings about Russell Wilson in that one season that he had with the Badgers?
Honestly, no. I watched the Badgers growing up, and then I went to school at Syracuse. So I also I've had a couple of negative experiences with University of Wisconsin-Madison, so I sort of get as a team.
Fair enough. In terms of like fan stuff too, like, well, have you gone to many games at Lambeau Field, and what's that experience like?
I went to one.
Okay.
Because I keep in mind, I haven't lived in Wisconsin as an adult, really. Okay. There was like one winter before I moved out to Los Angeles that I did. But I went to a Vikings-Packer game. Man, I think it might have been a year that I want to say Ray Rhodes was the coach of the Packers. Like, it was an in-between year. We did not make the playoffs. It was with Favre. It was the last game of the season, so it was freezing cold. like so cold. But my friend and I drove up there, and they beat the Vikings on a reverse play to Donald Driver. It was Donald Driver's first touchdown, I think, as a Packer. Like,
wow.
No one knew who he was. But I have seen the Packers. I saw the Packers Chargers down in San Diego, which was basically a home game for the Packers.
Right.
But no, I don't get out there too much. Like, even just the distance from Milwaukee to Green Bay was enough to thwart me if I didn't have like my parents taking me, and they never really did. They weren't interested in that. I mean, I've never been to Wisconsin. Is the whole cheese thing overrated, or the cheese curd stuff? Like, from over here, cheese curds look pretty good, but the fresh cheese in Wisconsin and all that kind of stuff that I hear about, how would you, is it something that you're like, yeah, you got to try it if you're there? I think so. Yeah. Cheese curds are great. Get them fried, get them not fried, but whatever you want. Like, who doesn't like cheese curds? I would say in general, Milwaukee enjoys putting cheese on things.
For sure. I mean, that's an American thing, for the most part. And
you go back, though, I'd say. There are moments where I'm looking at like a menu at a restaurant and just be like, Jesus. They have like one salad and everything else is like, we're all gonna die, like, if we eat this.
Yeah. And speaking of cheese, which some people would call the secondary aspect of a burger, the secondary of the Green Bay Packers has a lot of interesting names to me, names that people would recognize, but also, like, there's just so many of these names, I feel like, that I recognize, that I'm kind of unsure of what to expect from them this season and how the chemistry is between all of them. Devon House comes back. You mentioned Morgan Burnett. He's still the starting strong safety. Clinton Dix was a very good free safety. Quentin Rollins at cornerback. Demarius Randall was a first-round pick. Kevin King they just took in the second round out of Washington. A lot of Seahawks fans are very aware of Kevin King. Yeah. And then you've got second-round pick Josh Jones at safety. So many names. What are your expectations for the secondary and how those guys will perform, and maybe some of the guys that you're concerned about?
I'm waiting to see how Randall and Rollins do, because they were both a little banged up last year. They had good rookie seasons, but like, we're gonna need them to step up big time.
Yeah.
Kevin King, I don't expect much out of the gate from him. I feel like they're going to kind of work him in. I'll tell you, like, I'm interested to see, like, if it's Devon House or Randall that gets, like, the number one on the other team, because that was a huge problem last year.
Yeah.
Gunter, who I think was either a seventh rounder or an undrafted free agent, was our guy we were putting on Julio Jones in the playoff game, just because he was the biggest one.
Wow.
So I think eventually that'll be Kevin King's place. But I expect, and what I've heard, they're debuting something. I could get this name might be incorrect, but I heard that Packers are doing something called a nitro defense.
Wow.
Which is basically, like, from what I understand, they're bringing Morgan Burnett down into more of a middle linebacker position, and then they might play like other safeties like a Josh Jones up top. But like, I know that's something they're talking about. Maybe a reason they have so many of these names is they're maybe going to use safeties as linebackers a little bit, which I'm willing to try because we don't have many good inside linebackers if yet.
Yeah. And I love whenever a team unveils something or starts talking about it, like the Tennessee Titans and their smash mouth offense, the NASCAR defense, the nitro defense. It's always like, well, let's name it something sounding badass, and hopefully that helps too.
Yeah. Also, it gives you something to call it when when
it goes bad.
Eddie Lacy tears apart your nitro defense.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of defense, one of the oldest, I feel like, coaches in the NFL, though. I mean, not like super old for a human being. Dom Capers is 67, but he's been around what feels like forever. His first defensive coordinator job was in 1992 with the Steelers. It's not often that someone like sort of has a career job as a defensive coordinator. Of course, he's been head coach of the Panthers and Texans, but he's been the defensive coordinator in Green Bay since 2009. And, it seems like he'll hold that position for a while, or at least until they make some changes with Mike McCarthy. Do you have any feelings on Dom Capers? Because he's a guy that's been around for a while. And I know with coordinators, they often draw the ire of fans because it's easier to sort of hate a coordinator than it is to hate your favorite player or the head coach. So what do you think about Dom Capers?
I don't hate him as much as some Packer fans do. I'll say that because I think, like, if I'm reading his style correctly, he basically goes for broke a little bit. Like, he wants players that can like disrupt, and like he wants turnovers. Like, a lot of his teams, even in the more successful years, like the year we almost went undefeated, was were teams where like they'd have a ton of turnovers, but they also gave up some points. Or they that's what I meant. But as far as like last year goes, like people were like fire Capers and all this stuff.
Yeah,
and I was watching that being like, hire a cornerback.
Yeah.
Or like get us a middle linebacker. Like, I don't know how much you can blame him when like our holes are so obvious. And like that was the most frustrating thing about the offseason. Happy to have Martellus Bennett and Lance Kendricks, but like, and we had John LaFrancois Smith or whatever, I forget his name. But
Ricky John Francois.
Ricky John Francois, that's right. I had it all just in the wrong thing. But like, I was waiting all last year, just like, can we please get a cornerback? And then watching my roommate who's into the Patriots, like they're just going out and grabbing people like after they won the Super Bowl. What was the corner they got? I forget. I know you're not here to talk about the Patriots. Yeah.
Stephon Gilmore?
Yep, exactly. And then they went and got Brandon Cooks. And I'm like, as a Packers fan, you're just always just like waiting. And then like also thinking about, remember that year in the 90s when we won the Super Bowl, 96, 97? Like we got Reggie White that year. Like that's what I would like the Packers to do more of, is like go get a name. Don't get like an aging Julius Peppers, go get a guy. So I don't blame Capers as much as I blame our very conservative front office.
Well, that's totally fair and level-headed and reasonable. Wrapping up, just in terms of talking about your expectations for the Packers 2017. I mean, I'm looking at it right now. Obviously, we talked about their run to the NFC Championship last year that did not end well, and the fact that Aaron Rodgers is always going to keep the team in contention for as long as he's healthy. But the early season schedule looks pretty tough for the Green Bay, hosting the Seahawks, at the Falcons, hosting the Bengals. 2 weeks later, they're at the Cowboys, at the Vikings. But then I think things could technically get easier in the second half, but I don't like to look that far ahead because we don't know which teams will be great or, disappointing. So just looking in terms of, maybe your expectations for Green Bay as well as the expectations for Minnesota and Detroit in the division. What do you think of the Packers right now this season? Do you like them perhaps more or less than you have in other years with Aaron Rodgers?
I think the offense will be fun to watch. With the exception of maybe if the line can hold up a little bit, because I think we'll be in every game that we play because Rodgers has so many more weapons. Like I think it was a bold move to go get Martellus Bennett and Lance Kendricks, and we still have Richard Rodgers. And like in the preseason, there was a play, I forget exactly what he did, but he had both those tight ends, and he the defense was lined up like in the box to rush, and he just sent the tight ends to the outside and threw a fade to Martellus Bennett. And I think you're going to see Rodgers he's going to use those like pieces, and I bet you he calls more plays at the line. I have a feeling he requested, he's like, give me a couple tight ends. I think he did that. I think that'll open up some things in our offense. And I think I'm hoping we won't have the same thing we've had the last couple of years, where just at points it looked like our offense just wasn't working. But I think that we'll be in the game with our offense. I suspect our defense will have the same holes and problems that it's had the last few years as well, or at least it'll take the secondary some time to kind of catch up. People that are like, Packers are going to be in the Super Bowl. I'm always skeptical of that. That being said, I always put $20 on them to win the Super Bowl at their worst point in the year.
Oh, good.
because I want the better odds, but also I always believe they have a chance. When you have Aaron Rodgers, you have a chance. I think in every game you play.
Totally. Yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry, you can finish. You can do your thought.
Oh no, if you have something else to say, I'm just going to wrap it up.
Oh, okay. I was just saying Vikings could be good. I think we'll see how. I don't know how good you can be with Sam Bradford, but like their defense is so good, and we'll see how Dalvin Cook turns out. They always play us tough. Bears, I hate to say it, but I'm not really concerned about the Bears. I do love beating them, but they've taken a few from us too. And Lions are just gonna lion, like. A couple of years ago, I think people missed this, but a Lion sacked Aaron Rodgers and then taunted him with a discount double check and then tore his ACL.
Oh yes.
Did you see that?
That was DeAndre Levy, maybe.
I forget who it was, but that is like the most Lions thing I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
I don't know. I couldn't have written a funnier thing as a Packer fan.
Stephen Tulloch.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's I mean, the Lions too. It's that game against Green Bay last season where they had the win and they blew it. I forget. I'm trying to think of the exact context, but it was just another Aaron Rodgers Hail Mary, which is the thing that he is doing at a crazy rate compared to every other quarterback in history. Is just, I can win this game with the last throw at the 50.
Yeah, it's a little bit of luck for sure, but also he has a cannon. Like he does, he puts it in the right spot.
Little bit of luck, little bit of Lions defense. So, Josh, thanks so much again for coming on. What would you like to plug?
You can check out my Twitter at Mr. Josh Simpson, and then The Meat Improv is the name of my podcast. It's like bring on comedians. They tell meaty stories from their lives, so we tend to get into it there, and then we do improv inspired by those stories, and that tends to be pretty silly and fun.
Yeah, I know you guys have gone out on the road. Have you been to Seattle with it, or do you have you had any experiences doing comedy in Seattle, or would in the future?
I would love to. Portland, Seattle are two, and San Francisco are among our bigger markets outside of Los Angeles. So we might do a sequel to our train tour. Take a train up. I think it's the Silver Light or something like that. But I would. That's the next place I want to go. Is the Pacific.
Great.
So,
well, everyone listening. Go ahead.
I said, hit me up if you're in Seattle and have an idea where I could perform.
Totally. Yes, of course. Hit him up on Twitter. And if and when the Seattle trip happens, we will definitely get fans out there or let them know when and where it's happening. Cool. Thanks again, Josh, for coming on to the Seaside Chats podcast. I want to wish you luck, but I can't do that this week. So.
Yeah, bad luck this week. Good luck the rest of the season.
Yeah, there you go. Well, good luck and good health to all your players, and we'll see what happens on Sunday.
Yep.
That's it for Seaside Chats with Kenneth Arthur. Thanks again to Josh Simpson. You can follow us on Twitter at Field Goals or myself at Kenneth Arthur S. And of course, you can subscribe on iTunes and just check us out on our website, fieldgoals.com. Thanks, and we'll see you next week.